elsewhere. And I don't think there have been the right conditions for them to develop in Italy, and I'm not sure that they would exist even today. Now, this is the hemisphere of open innovation. It means doing lots of things, not necessarily all of them, but just to demonstrate the complexity from a corporate perspective to work with startups. So we should wonder what should and could be done. And the answer would be many different things with different goals in mind. Let me start from the left. We need to look at what is going on in the places where you have a higher innovation density, like the innovation outpost, the innovation antenna in the Silicon Valley in Israel, where the new is starting to have these very favorable observatory. Well, in San Francisco, we're hosting ENI. 3-4 will come in the next few months. Italy is starting to become starting to place boots on the ground in the Silicon Valley. Entrepreneurship is under the umbrella of innovation because it needs to be managed according to open innovation logics, which is integration with what's outside. And then you have the innovation lab. We've been talking about accelerators today of venture builders and startup studios. That is how companies try to develop in-house and outside their activities, their business. And then the venture client, a startup in the early stage is a bad match for a big company. They're too young and the others are too slow, so nothing will ever happen. No partnerships will be created. So generally, the partnerships and the venture clients will be more scale-ups than startups, and then partnerships develop with a participation in equity, corporate venture capital, and then if they fall in love, the M&A might ensue. But this is a world in continuous evolution. These are the trends that we see when we observe the big players and what they're doing. I'll just read them because I just have 2 minutes. Okay, this is what's going on. First of all, the Silicon Valley, Israel, as well as Korea, are places where there are more and more companies that are creating headquarters. In Silicon Valley, there are 391 companies that do just innovation. In Italy, we have 1. There will be 5 to 6 in the coming months. Entrepreneurship, as it was devised, as you have it in your company, is something that no longer exists. It's no longer HR initiatives to create some motivation and show 4 different puppets on the theater. I'm thinking of Nestlé, I'm thinking of ENG and Vodafone. These are mechanisms to generate a deal flow increasingly integrated with the external startups, corporate accelerators. And I'm sorry to say this because there's a plan to develop 25 of them in Italy. This is a model that no one is adopting any longer around the world. And that is because historically it did not lead to any results. So if you look at what Telefonica is doing with Wayra, Wayra 2020 is not at all the Wayra of 2012. And we are creating accelerators, thinking of what they should have been in 2014. Venture builders are on the ride. Everybody wants to be a venture builder. But talking to 6, 7 companies, I got 10 different messages. So there's some level of confusion about these tools and what they can do. But certainly, there are models abroad like BP Launch that are growing. Venture client and is mainstream. Corporate venture capital is just booming, but it's not a game for kids, it's for grown-ups. The size of the fund needs to be 150 and 300 million to invest every year. Sometimes I hear about funds of 25 millions and 15 millions. They have no reason to be. And then M&A, which is missing in Europe. Google is buying startups every week, Facebook twice a month, and in Europe there's almost nothing like that. A final message, Riccardo, I don't think there are any ready-made recipes, but the only benefit of a late mover is that they can look at what others have been doing before them. So we can benchmark it continuously. We know how models work, and if they work and if they don't. I think it's a unique opportunity to start stuff in 2021. Presenting them as new, but building them on models that have been in existence ever since 2015. Now, thinking of startups, there are startups also in publishing. There are people who have launched companies that work with different models. One of them is called the Wheel. Our children will know what it is. It exists only on the Instagram, and it has a very interesting business model. And the founder of Wheel will moderate the next interview. Alessandro Tomasi is with us. It's a startup. How is it performing? Very well. I have to say, it's performing very well. Good afternoon to you all. In terms of turnover, as well as in terms of the growth of our product. What's the Wheel formula? Just give it in a sentence. We don't take care of breaking news because that's what the press does. We try to give references in order to explain and understand the facts on Instagram, Facebook. And podcasts. Okay, now in this case I'll only be a moderator and chair, and I'm very happy to welcome on stage a young woman who did lots of wonderful things that she's going to tell us about. She co-founded a startup that she's now left. She exited it, and she's launching a new concept, combining together her experience with a work-life balance notion. We're going to talk about this with Silvia Wang. Hi, Silvia. Hi, Ale. Hi, everyone. Okay, I have a classic question for you to start off with. What has been your experience, and how did you develop your great startup? And then you will tell us about your current projects. Yeah, I'm more than willing to do that. When I was 28, I was working abroad, and I decided to travel back to Italy because I wanted to get married. And that's the idea behind Pronto Pro, which I founded with my then fiancé, now my husband. Pronto Pro is a portal for services. You can find photographers on it, the wedding planner, the plumber, the architect, the electrician. So you were in Southeast Asia, first in Taiwan and then in Indonesia. And from there, we decided to travel back to Italy and move back to Italy because we wanted to get married. And that had to happen in Italy because we wanted to live in Italy and to go back to Italy. We decided to create Pronto Pro. What was the most important lesson you learned from that experience? It was a beautiful experience which lasted for 5 years. And what I can say is that the thing that really made me proud of what I was doing was the fact that we decided to create Pronto Pro because of its social impact and the fact that we had really accomplished a project that would help many families of professionals. That was my greatest joy. And also there were many lessons I learned in creating a startup. It was very stressful years in many respects. But now that made it possible to launch my new project, my brand new project. I think it's particularly interesting to hear about that. First of all, because of what you said, the startup life seems to be a frantic life with very little time for yourselves. So maybe you're now more aware of what needs to happen. You launched Pronto Pro while you were getting married. So, yes, it was a double challenge. Well, I keep saying this, I'm not good at timing and planning. Now, I'm 8 months pregnant now, And we've just launched Serenis, our brand new project. It's a beautiful project because, once again, it originated from my personal need, since it was so stressful when we created the startup from a family perspective, not just the business, because my husband was the co-founder. And is that good or bad? Well, I have to say, all in all, good, and he's here, by the way. But I needed a lot of psychological support and thought it was very valuable to me. So it was something that was very dear to me. And not much is said. Well, actually, not much was said about this. So I just recently exited Pronto Pro during COVID, and during COVID, the idea of mental well-being just boomed. And so we've been looking into this, and there are no big references in this. And since it was very dear to me, we ended up thinking that we could create something with that. Now, while the previous experience had a big economic impact on professionals that are good at doing their job and not so much at doing marketing of what they do, now today there has been some taboo so far, a hard time talking about mental well-being. Do you think that the COVID pandemic has sort of awakened us to that need? And have we now understood the importance of taking care of ourselves from that perspective too? Well, before no one would talk about it. Well, today it is a daily topic, and it spans from adolescents to grown-ups. Influencers talk about it. Now, the case of Simone Biles, was in the press during the Olympics. So the taboo is no longer there. And so we think that we can contribute to killing this stigma. If I were to ask how many people are in sports, probably everybody. If I were to ask how many are seeing a psychologist, probably I would see 3 hands raising. And that's the issue, because we, as people, we are more minds, we are our minds more than we are our bodies. But what defines us, we are our bodies as well, but what defines us is our mind. With all the challenges that we see, that we face on a daily basis, it's necessary to have that support and feel at ease with oneself, and then, living better, get to know oneself better, working better with a team. There's a lot you can do with some help, but not much is being said about this. This adventure is in its beta stage, but we're not going to tell the audience more about this. Can you tell us more about its origin? I started exploring the possibility in May. In January, I sold Pronto Pro. I exited Pronto Pro, and in May I started working on Serenis. You didn't want to stop. Well, actually, I wanted to go on holiday for 1 year, but the pandemic was raging, so my holidays got cancelled twice. So I had, well, too bad. And then the baby came, and so I could no longer move around. So I kept myself busy. So again, without revealing too much, there is an idea of matchmaking. Yes, that's the point. There are many portals that will take you to the contacts, like the Yellow Pages many years ago. But me as a patient, I'm not so interested in having the contacts or address as a psychologist, but understanding what's the best match for me. But after I pay, because in Italy it's almost all private and not public service, will I have results? So that is something that was a problem for me personally, and it took me a long time to find the right psychologist. Serenis answers that question and responds to that need. It will guide you to well-being. Okay. Do you think that this digital interface can make things easier to get over that taboo? Well, yes, when it comes to the taboo, of course, yes. If digital is better compared to what exists physically, well, no, because it will never replace for the time you spend physically with the psychologist, but can help you really find the place where you'd find the best environment for you. Think of the young generations. They will spend a lot of time in front of their screens, so we'll make it more accessible, and then we'll take care of the actual problems. Now, as Riccardo said before, Wheel 2 is a startup that we co-founded 1.5 years ago, and I'm exhausted. How do you feel? Well, normally at 9 p.m. I'm in bed. I have the sleep-wake hours as my child, same as my child. That takes us to the work-life balance discussion, which is a topic that is paid a lot of attention in the United States. Is there a subjective definition, or is there a dynamic definition or static one? Well, that is actually something that I often got the question about. I was often asked, "Are you a supermom? You had a startup that you launched. Now you're pregnant. You launched a startup while you were organizing your own wedding." Well, I wanted to debunk this idea of the supermom. I wouldn't want to convey the message to young women entrepreneurs that everything can be done and that you needed to do everything. You can't be a perfect mother, wife, worker, entrepreneur. So it's about choices. But the message I would like to pass on to them is that it shouldn't be about giving up things. I shouldn't give up because I'm pregnant, because I don't believe in myself, I don't trust myself, because it has to be a choice, and then you get organized to do things. I mean, I found out I was pregnant after a few months. I had launched Serenis, so both my child and Serenis are dear to me, so I created the right conditions to be able to take care of both things, so knowing that I couldn't do both at best. And just like I did not make the meals of my firstborn, because you need to accept compromises. And by the way, I'm not a good cook. So you need to plan your timing. And so I needed to do things I knew I needed to do things before September, by September, so I got organized because the child would be delivered in October. So we worked very well in 10 different places with people that were here this week and by the seaside next week. So everything worked very well. We created the preconditions. And then the fact of doing some fundraising allowed us to understand that we needed to have a certain makeup of our team, and not every competence and skill would be available from the start. And so we started with those who could support us at the beginning. We have many entrepreneurs from the best startups in Italy who invested in us, and we created the right conditions to do things well without having to give up or postpone.
Quasi dandolo per scontato, però secondo me non lo è così tanto.
This is certainly not to be given for granted. First of all, the topic of diversity, so to be able to welcome a team with different needs. Otherwise, you only hire the people who are like you. And two, having then policies that are based maybe related to flexibility that results from our experience. So it's very important. So the impact we can have in our teams in relation to our needs and our feelings. And so what is the most interesting aspect to create an environment to manage this flexibility? Well, first of all, this is one of the reasons why, in the end, I decided to found my company. That is to say, because outside, I didn't find what made me happy to work in a certain environment, which is actually having a strong mission. So all the people in our team have come in contact with psychological support and mental well-being. And so they deeply believe in this. And then also from the experience of Pronto Pro, we decided to make a small team. And so we have all people who are very, very competent, so not junior, but senior, to whom I can delegate a lot so that I cannot be present. So every day, maybe they ask me, do this, do that, but you can truly delegate and depend on these people, on this team, and also a lot of support. So we have very strong advisors who support us, and often, also because myself, even though I would work 24 hours a day, I'm aware I'm not the best in all fields. And actually, acknowledging your weaknesses and delegating it makes a difference. So this is how we are setting up the team. So you give for granted things that are not at all so common. And congratulations. In 2018, you were awarded a very important award, the Gamma Donna Award for Best Entrepreneur. And of course, we draw our inspiration from various things. So, for instance, you learned a lot from your family. And what about the example that you set? What would you tell people who would like to do the same? I think a perfect example to say that everybody can make it. Because I've never been brilliant at school. I have so we are two. I didn't even ever have, I'm not the one who at 15 years old knew already what to do in life. But I had is like, the kids of doctors become doctors, because what was natural for me was to see the example from my parents. So my parents came over here from China, and they had nothing, and so they had to roll up their sleeves and work, and the only thing they could do was something on their own. They couldn't even speak Italian, and so to me that was normal. So being an entrepreneur, and they have been a brilliant example. And it's not that I didn't try, because of course the school teaches you to do certain things. Then I realized that in bad companies, that's not the right place for me, because I'm for to the point and meritocracy. Then with the Gamma Donna Award, I hope I inspire young women to experience what I have experienced. So give an example and show that there are many possible journeys. You don't necessarily need to be a superstar, so not only superstar can make it, because there are many different routes that can take you to entrepreneurial success. Very well. I'm fascinated by what you said. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you.
Riccardo. Grazie Silvia. Ciao, ma tu ce n'hai un altro di intervista, spero domani? Domani. A che ora?
You have another interview tomorrow in the afternoon.
Parli con chi?
Sì, con il founder di Plug and Play.
Ah, grande storia.
Founder of Plug and
domani
Play.
pomeriggio.
Domani.
Quindi anche
So
domani
see you
pomeriggio
tomorrow.
avremo un paio
So
di
tomorrow
interventi
too
sul tema
we'll
startup,
have
di cui
a couple
uno con Diego
of
Piacentini.
discussions, one with Diego Piacentini.
Avremmo voluto fare la pausa.
So we were supposed to have a break, but we decided not to. So let's get straight away. So let's cancel the coffee break. And since we talked a lot about lack of capital, venture capitalists, and the next panel is managed by Noah. Sorry, I mispronounced. Noah Oana from Exor City, managing partner of Exor City.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
I thought we were going to take a break, but you were
apparently
the panel was ready.
Yeah, we were told that that people here are not to be trusted with breaks because it's very nice outside, and if we let you guys out, you're not coming back.
Much better here now.
That's right.
Let's take the moment.
It's mine?
Yes, it's yours.
Oh, wonderful. Stage is mine. Great pleasure to be here. So I'm Noam Ohana, and I lead Exor Seeds, which is the early stage investment arm of Exor. And I'm in a country where I don't have to explain anything about Exor, which is fantastic. We have some of our esteemed guests here, and I saw that some mistakes were made earlier. I don't want to make any of those mistakes, so I have my little thing. I'll first call on stage Carla Ferrari, who's with us, and she's the CFO of Compagnia di San Paolo. Also a foundation that does not need any explanation here, has been involved in European and American VC through a dedicated program over more than 20 years now. And she will tell us more about her perspective on the coming of age of the European ecosystem. She will be the only one LP on the panel. Then we have Matthias Longman, who is the founder and CEO of Moonfire Ventures.
Matthias.
Matthias was the co-founder of Atomico, a well-known and established European fund. Worked there for 13 years. Was involved in incredible company like Klarna, Viagogo, and founded Moonfire. Is it 2 years ago, Matthias?
Just under 2 years ago.
Just under 2 years. So it's a European seed focused, helping founders really from the very beginning, I guess, you could say some pre-seed, and getting in place the right foundation so that they can get to this high growth companies that we know of. Then we have Alexis Oussou. Alexis, can you join us? Alexis is a founder and managing partner of HCVC, Hardware Club, which is a firm dedicated to hard tech companies. He founded the firm in 2015, and he's going to tell a bit more about, I guess we'll get a chance to ask him some question about what's different about Hardware Club. It has over 600 members worldwide, and as you can guess from the name, these are passionate members that are passionate about hardware. Here we go. Very fortunate to have this panel with us. The first thing I think is really the reason we're here, which is the coming of age of the European ecosystem, and we all believe here that we've entered a new chapter, new sequence. We see wonderful opportunities, but I want to start, maybe asking about more specifically the Italian and Turin ecosystem, and what you could tell us about what has changed here and what you're doing with the foundation to, further develop that ecosystem.
Is it working? Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah, it's working. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and especially to have this opportunity to talk about the future of venture capital. As an investor, we discussed it. I am an LP, an investor. We work a lot, and we invested a lot in venture capital. We have a total portfolio of around 7 billion, like 600 million euros, and partly of this portfolio is allocated to private markets. So venture capital is part of this, and 40% of the 1.5 billion euro is allocated in venture capital investment. But we invested in the past, especially in US and in the Asian Pacific area. Today, the venture capital industry is experiencing a very important, exciting time in Europe, and is starting to ramp up. And we think it's the right moment to refocus our investment strategy to increase our exposure towards European venture capital. And we are strongly committed in this purpose. We work not only as an investor, but also as ecosystem developer. What does it mean, ecosystem developer? It means that we have a model based on 3 pillars, if you want. We have patient capital, that is to say that we are an investor who can invest financial resources with a perspective of long term. And we are a foundation, so our prevailing activity is based on a grant-making scheme. This means that we can also support not profitable projects, for example, POC, proof concept, through the academy, and bring the ideas from the academy to the market. Third element, a third pillar of our strategy is represented by a so-called multidisciplinary mindset. We have a set of skills inside our foundation, and we can also find outside technological and financial competencies able to finalize and to develop important projects, especially data-driven projects. For example, we consider that it's very important to work on data, and we think that venture capital is the right way to foster this attitude. That is some example. If you want, I can go on explain that we have an innovation platform, and on this platform we invest in a different stage, from the idea, from the academy, till to private equity, passing through incubators, accelerators. We work with, for example, with Techstars in Turin in order to accelerate new startups, and it is a very successful program. Then we have also invested in different Italian VC funds in the different verticals, in different sectors, also technological sectors, in order to give the opportunity to this VC to invest in new startups.
Yeah.
And we want to create a positive and attractive environment for founders and investors in our territory.
That's great, and I guess it's a great transition. Let's see how the VCs themselves found this new environment. And so we have Matthias and Alexis. Maybe tell us a little bit, is that new world in Europe, how real is it, and what do you see that you didn't see a few years back?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys, oh, here we go. No, I 100% agree in terms of what was said, and I think it's really a unique period. So having worked in venture now for 20 years, believe it or not, you know, the last few years have been remarkable, and the last 12, 18 months have been really just hit another level. So what's happening is success is breeding success. And so last year we had a total investment in US dollars of 40 billion into the European ecosystem. H1 of this year is 60 billion just for H1. So let's see what happens for the rest of the year. But you know, today Europe takes up 20% of global capital going into venture goes into Europe. And that compares to a few years ago, 2019, where we were only 13, 14%. So we're actually not only growing, we're actually capturing market share. And it makes Europe like one of the most interesting areas in the world right now, which is why Sequoia, Lightspeed, General Catalyst, and everybody else is sort of thinking about, have set up offices, and more of them are setting up offices. And we're seeing that, you know, Tiger, Coatue, a lot of these big funds, you know, they are actively investing at pace in Europe. So there is definitely a sort of a renaissance happening in Europe. There's a golden age in tech, and it's coming through at every part of the sort of ecosystem. And then you have to say, so why is this happening? I think, first of all, Europe has great universities. I think we've always had those great institutions. They're now realizing that they can build global category winners, and that's what's driving this growth. Then on the investment side, you have all these people who are in public markets who are now saying, well, hold on a minute, what am I doing in public markets? These are sort of kind of flatlining type of companies. Sorry, that's my kind of the way I look at the world. But you know, you have 33 trillion in the US, so in the public markets, that is now looking at the private markets and thinking, oh, hold on a minute, I need to get into this game. And then you have the same thing happening in Europe, and maybe it's between 20 trillion or something of that level. And so our ecosystem is growing at pace. It's really big, and we're taking on bigger and bigger challenges. And so for us as a firm, how do we react to that? we are really focused on building our own software and building our own data-driven process together with a thesis approach to be able to be better equipped to invest in the next generation of founders. And so, you know, as this whole ecosystem is going to expand, so the number of deals, the type of companies that are being created, we are building systems that allow us to scale with the ecosystem. So sorry, that was the sort of lengthy answer.
That's great. And I guess, Alexis, what is your take on that coming of age?
No, I mean, I agree with what was just said by Carla and Matthias. I think that's really amazing what we're seeing in Europe. I think one thing that I may add, which is that COVID has helped the European ecosystem in a way, because a lot of founders, especially in our space, we invest in hard tech, so in companies that build and go after hard technical challenges. And a lot of those companies, 5-10 years ago, they would go in the US, and they would, you know, just, you know, a founder wouldn't think about starting a company, maybe in London, but, you know, definitely not in Paris or in Berlin or in Milano. So they would go to San Francisco and they would try to raise money there. For the past 18 months, it's not been possible to do that, right? The travel ban has been a great kind of a boost for the European ecosystem in a way, right? Because it's kind of, you know, founders are stuck here now. They can't really travel to the US, and there's so much more money than there was, and so much more talent than there was. Then you know, I think just yesterday, an extra data point, there was $1.2 billion raised in France. That's the equivalent of the entire year 2015, which is, you know, insane when you think about it, right? The growth of the ecosystem. Yeah, I don't know specifically.
I have to say that I don't know if I should say that. I'm going to say it. We passed on both of these companies, so it tells you how much of a genius you have on scene here. Yeah, for now. No, very, very helpful, Alexis. And I think if we have you, and then we can come back the other way. But you know, there is a sense that the big categories have been built. So it's almost like, okay, who needs another marketplace for used cars? Who needs another, you know, online marketplace for furniture? And so a question for you is, you know, if that's right, then the next things that need to be built, that we all need here, are going to be hard to build. And there might still be a big software component, but there, you know, so do you see this in hardware? Do you see that the reluctance that we had seen over the last decade, a lot of VCs saying, I don't touch hardware, this is complicated, you know, do you see this is changing?
Yeah, totally. I think what we've seen when we started, especially we were talking about building a fund that we invest in hardware and hard tech in Europe, people were looking at us and say, well, you know, the only place where you can really do that is US and you know, in China, and I think things have changed there. And the fact that we haven't really invested in, you know, in complex industries, in companies that need a little more money early on, but potentially build very large businesses, creates an opportunity. We're seeing this today with what's happening in the, you know, global supply chain, chip shortage. There's basically one small country, and my partner in the room is actually from it, from Taiwan, that has, you know, a monopoly of foundries. So if you're looking at chips today, there's a small country in the world where like most of them come from, and that's a problem for the US. That's a problem for Europe, because we haven't invested in this space for so long. We've relied on so there's a sovereignty kind of question behind it. But yeah, I do agree. You know, we think that especially as an ecosystem growing, some of those things that were a little more complex to start, so companies where you need, you know, a little more talent early on, sometimes more capital early on, weren't necessarily started. And now that the ecosystem has grown, it's possible. So that kind of the number of VCs, and maybe Matthias could comment on that we're saying we don't touch hardware, we don't touch hard tech, has shrunk to a very limited number of firms those days, and that's quite exciting. So that's more follow-on money for our capital, for our portfolio companies. That's more competition sometimes for our deals. That's a good thing overall for the ecosystem.
Matthias, you can comment on that, but maybe also tell us, in terms of the categories and the nature of the opportunities that you see, has it changed?
Yeah, no, it absolutely has changed. What I would say, you know, like we don't invest in hardware. For example, you know, there could be sort of some occasion where we would have a component of hardware, but we don't do it. But again, it shows like the growth of the ecosystem. We're going to have many more different types of players that are investing in different things. And you know, when you talk about those hard problems, you know, it's interesting, you know, it makes me think, you know, did we really need Zoom? You know, because we had video conferencing, we had Skype, we had Google Meet, we had, I don't know, Blue Jeans that everybody thought was really cool. Zoom just absolutely smashed it, right? And so they were able to get something that didn't exist, really, that was, you know, a little bit better. But then, you know, I'm also, like, one of the companies that we have in our portfolio that's here today is Giovanni at Humans, you know, his company Humans, which is dealing with human resource information sort of systems. And there's loads of different services around that, but they need to evolve in our new pandemic era. So you can't really stick to the same solutions you used to have. So what they have, which is they are sort of attacking the concept of an all-in-one human resource software, and they're actually doing what, you know, the way I call it is a plug and play. So you pick the components of the software that you'd like to have, and so they work together with the top-tier specialists. And then you can integrate it into Humans, and then you can deliver that really quickly across different countries. And so you're doing payroll in different countries and different jurisdictions. It's not a problem. But that's becoming something you need to focus on in this new world where you're living virtually, and your office is virtual. It's not as physical as it used to be. And so you need to take better care of your people. So your human resource solutions need to be a lot broader than they were before. It's not about the restaurant anymore or the gym that you had. It's like, how do you take care of your people? How do you build those people? So it keeps evolving is what I'm saying.
Yeah, helpful. And I guess one of the questions that is tied to that is, like, you're obviously building hopefully the infrastructure to allow these fund managers to find the right type of talent. And so you have to take, I guess, a long-term view of that. So what would you do to, you know, kind of to enable this pillars, these building blocks to emerge?
Yeah, what I noticed and what I think is needed by the new venture capital firms today is, as I mentioned, is a more attractive, complex environment, where you can find not only capital, as I said, but also knowledge, technology, skills, talent, and entrepreneurship. I think that we are more mature than in the past, and today we need more entrepreneurship. And for this reason, I think that we need to create, and we have to contribute to the creation of such an environment in order to have VC investors with, let's say, deep pockets, but a greater experience than in the past, and also attention and greater risk appetite, but at the same time they have to allocate the different risks. And these VC investor, in my opinion, now they need to invest more money earlier and more often. So
brilliant.
I think that this is my experience. I don't think that it's possible to do that like investor, but I really realize that that's exactly what they need. So environment with technological components, skills, talent, and on the other side, the investor has to be able to do this kind of things.
Do you mind if I touch on that point? Because, you know, obviously I've sort of agreed with.
She's saying you need more money and faster. You're like, yeah, I want to touch on that.
No, but I think you know, let's
they need to be able to use
of course,
this money.
No, of course. No, I think, so just going back to the ecosystem, you're seeing a lot of money going into that later stage. And I think what's interesting is that the stage that we're working at in terms of being at the earliest stages, you know, it hasn't grown in the same capacity. You know, in the US, you had an explosion of seed funds, and that really hasn't happened in Europe yet. So I think, you know, in terms of all the sort of international activity that's happening from Series A and beyond, you know, it's a different story at seed. We're getting investors come down a little bit at seed, but I think the program that you need to run as a seed investor, so this is a philosophy that I believe is exactly what you're saying. You need a little bit of a larger portfolio. You need to be going after interesting companies, you know, that you can, by the way, are becoming even more interesting because usually they're multi-generational founders, so they've done it a couple of times where they've worked in other companies. And you want to have a nice, well-rounded portfolio when you make those investments, and then be able to build a community around that. Because our portfolios, not only are we helping them, not only are people who we know and experts in our network, but our portfolio is helping each other. And so they help bring these companies forward.
Yeah, I mean, you said community, which is a big thing for us. So before we started the fund, 6 years ago, we started a community for hard tech companies in Europe first, and then we expanded it to US. And I think that's really important when you think about how you're going to source deals tomorrow. You need to be relevant, right? You need to write checks to be fast and to be able to kind of have deep pockets. I agree with that. But also, there's never been this much money. And our money is not necessarily more valuable than someone else's money. But the fact that we're able to bring value, the fact that we're specialized, the fact that we are able to open doors that other investors may not be able to open, brings extra value, because when we invest in a company, we're able to kind of land deals for them, potentially find a manufacturer and do things that other VCs wouldn't be able to do, which means that in a few cases, we've been able to invest on lower valuations than other VCs, typically because founders really wanted to work with us. Obviously, that's not going to happen all the time, and valuations are still an important kind of a part of a deal for founders. But I do think that being relevant and bringing value and being able to create beyond just a fund, but a community is all the more important today.
Yeah, and I think proof that this community aspect is important. I guess that the work that you've done in Turin and Italy is significant. I was short anecdote. I live in Tel Aviv, and I was shown a deck of a cyber entrepreneur, and in the deck was his project to build a cyber center in Turin. And so I called the guy once he sent me the deck. I'm like, did you add this because you Googled me? And he's like, no, this is my deck. There's a lot going on in Turin. We think that there's great talent at the right price. And Tel Aviv does not need another cyber center. This is closer to some of the clients. And so I think some of these things are happening, right? And we see talent moving.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'd say that, so also what the data shows that, we have now over 200 companies that have reached $1 billion or more in valuation, and, up from 5 years ago where it was only 20, right? So it's grown a lot. But the interesting fact is that they're coming from 17 different cities, and I think that's expanding. And so you're seeing, whereas before everything was clustered in, let's say, the Valley, in Europe, there's loads of great engineers and great smaller communities being built across the board. And so it's really exciting as like I said, the success is breeding success, and these new ones are getting actually that capital, that also the expertise that's coming into different cities across Europe.
That's great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And if we're talking about the future of venture capital, one thing is the future of venture capital. I don't think it's Silicon Valley, right? If you've been in San Francisco lately, we were talking about that last night. That's not what you want the world to look like, right? Adding and concentrating so much wealth, talent, and
misery
in a place. It's hard to manage, and it doesn't necessarily create the best social kind of consequences. But if you're able to, and Europe is a great kind of example for that, having a lot of large cities, being able to build a network of talent between those cities and capital, I think we have a much more sustainable model there.
Yep.
I think that this is a very important evolution. We notice as investors that this is the flourishing of different innovation ecosystems throughout Europe, and this is a big difference compared to the past, compared to the US, where once in the past only the Silicon Valley was the right place to stay for a startup, for a founder, because it was all concentrated. Today in Europe, we have different innovation ecosystems in London, in Paris, but also in Stockholm, Amsterdam, Helsinki. And I think that Turin can be the right candidate for an Italian place to have in this new panorama, in this new scenario.
And I think there are other elements, and keep on bringing personal examples. But my younger partner, who lives in New York, has been here for 2 days, and he cannot believe, this small aspects of the quality of life on a daily basis, how prices are so much more reasonable than if you live on the East or West Coast in the US. And so attracting talent, if you have reasonable schools and all that, I think these things matter, and they matter more and more to this younger generation. One point I see, obviously watching the clock here, one point I wanted to touch about is, if we're talking about the future of VC, is diversity. We talk a lot about gender diversity, about, obviously coming from the US, we had, the BLM movement, a renewed focus on race. And what does it mean? Obviously, it means something maybe different in Europe, but how do you think about it, and how do you adjust your activity to take that into account?
We, as investor, we adopted a very robust ESG policy, and our investment have to be compliant with the ESG policy we adopted. This means, for example, that we cannot invest in certain activities, and we cannot invest, we have to look at the gender balance in the board. So we started 2 years ago to develop such a policy, and now we are going to increase more and more all the different steps, and I think that will be very, it will be a big focus on this aspect in the future, especially from the three components: E as concern the climate change, yep, as the social aspect for us, they are very important, respect of works and the workers, and then G as the governance has to be, yep, fully completed. So for us it's very important, and it will be not a secondary aspect.
Great.
Yeah, so I mean, I can just name a little bit. Like you said early on, we're a young firm, so we're less than 2 years old, and but having built a firm in the past, this was a big component of what we were doing. But yeah, just to give you a highlight, even though we haven't created any sort of metrics or anything that we need to achieve or anything like that. 25% of our founders have come from a female background, and 38% are coming from sort of diverse ethnic background. So, to us, like, we see that as part of performance. We see that you need diversity to be able to build great companies. That's where partly innovation comes from. And I think if you're looking at addressing a broad set of markets, you need people coming from lots of different perspectives. So, and again, my own background, I'm Swedish, but I was born in the US. I've lived in, I was brought up partly in India, in Kenya, Italy as well, by the way. Italy, I lived in Italy as a child, so parlo un po' di italiano. And then I lived in France and went to university in Canada. Spent a little bit of time in Sweden and then came to the UK. So my perspective is also, like, I feel looking at it from a more broad angle.
Yeah, I mean, diversity, for obvious reasons, has always been something that we had in mind. I'd say, I think if you were talking about differences between US and Europe, I think it's easier to talk about ethnic diversity in the US than it is in Europe for many reasons, and that would be a very long conversation. But I think in France, for example, I wouldn't be able to run statistics based on ethnic data on my portfolio. That would be illegal. We still do it. We still try and find ways, but there's this kind of sometimes
give you
frustration.
Something that I don't think Alexis would share, but established institutional French investor would tell Alexis, you have to really think more about diversity, because he doesn't have yet a female partner. But obviously in the US, if you said that to Alexis, it would be your last day in the office, because I guess unfortunately he had a few opportunities to think about diversity in a long and deep way. So, but to touch on something else, you went actually the extra mile, because you do have a partner who is not French. Right, and so I think diversity in France might also be, you have a partner who's Asian who came and lives and works in France.
Yeah, absolutely. Jerry is actually in the room, and he comes from Taiwan, and he's been very early in the firm. We the two of us and our third partner Emmerich at the joint later come from different backgrounds. We grew up in different continents. We actually went to school in different continents. So I feel there's a lot of diversity. in this, and and I think there's a lot to do, and probably some changes to push in Europe for ethnic diversity. There's a conference next month that's called VC Forum. I was looking at the list of speakers last time. I think there's work to do. Let's say. The one thing I would add is regarding gender diversity, because it's also something that we don't take, just because of my background or some of our partners' background, we don't take it for granted that we're a diverse firm. So we try and push. One big thing for us has been, it's been hard. We haven't invested in 25%, female founders. We're seeing less than 5% in our deal flow, less of 5% of companies that have a female co-founder. Just because hard tech, the space we invest in, engineering schools, you'd see very few, female, unfortunately, and we're seeing the kind of the down the funnel, and we're seeing the consequences of that. So we're also thinking about how we can, bring initiatives that go beyond, just looking or investing in every female founder that we'd meet, but just bringing more, female kind of talent to start hot tech companies.
Yeah. Great. Look, I think we come out of that conversation energized. We have an ecosystem that is growing in Turin, in Italy. We have exciting companies that are coming to market at European companies at a higher rate and velocity than we've seen in a long time. We have a willingness to engage with substantial issues like sustainability, diversity, and do this job that we love in a way that is hopefully also improving society in whatever way we can. So really a round of applause for our guests here, and thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you.
Thank you. More money and faster, it was you?
Sorry?
More money and faster. It's my new mantra. I like it. Thank you. No. Thank you. Più soldi, più veloce, perfetto. Mi pare una botta. Allora, un po' di notizie pratiche. Abbiamo ancora un panel.
Some technical information. We have another panel, and then we'll have a concert by Alex Braga, who plays with artificial intelligence. As a reward for being here, you'll get something to drink at the end of the panel. And at the end of the concert, you'll get a ticket, and there's an open bar where you can have a drink. For everyone who's staying for Alex's concert. As you know, one of the most frequent sayings in Silicon Valley and around it is the next big thing. So we've asked Tamsin Booth to stay with us on stage to tell us about the next big thing.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel, The Next Big Thing, which is really about life as a very young, high-growth tech startup. As mentioned, I'm Tamsin Booth, Tech and Business Editor of The Economist, and I'd like to welcome on stage Giovanni Luperti, co-founder of Humans, which is a software people management system designed with remote working in mind. Rachel Delacour, co-founder of Sweep, which is a B2B platform that allows large firms to understand, manage, and reduce their carbon footprint. And lastly, Ferdinando Randisi, co-founder of Fabric Nano. I'm going to get him actually to explain what the company does, because it's pretty complex, but I think it's a cell-free biomanufacturing company. Now, the really important thing about these firms, the firms founded by these three entrepreneurs, is that they're really at the early stage of things. They're on, two of them are on their seed funding stage. Only one is on Series A. So it's a vulnerable point in their history. A few years ago, I wrote a long story about the travails of startup founders in continental Europe. We called it Les Misérables, And we just detailed just how difficult it is to be a small company in continental Europe. And I will never forget, there was one founder that I talked to a lot called Anil de Mello. He founded a company called Mobuzz in 2005. It went bankrupt because of the financial crisis. And so Anil went bankrupt, and he was then pursued by Spanish Social Security for another 5 years to kind of extract from him the severance money that they had to pay on behalf to his employees. It was a nightmarish experience, and I'm not sure if he ever recovered from it. So we must remember that these young companies face an awful lot of difficulties. So I think my first question goes to you, Ferdinando. It's really, you know, there's a study by the Harvard Business School that found that really about 3/4 of young companies fail and go under. Why is it? What has possessed you to think that your firm can survive and prosper and become big? What's it like being at this stage, and how daunting do things look?
Well, I guess that to the first part of the question about why is it that I started, even though it's very risky, building a globally important deep tech company, a deep tech company that could change the world, that is my dream and was my dream, and I really would have not forgiven myself if I didn't do it just because it could go wrong. Also, I had just graduated from my PhD, and at the time, I didn't have a job lined up, so I really felt like I had nothing to lose. I should just go and give it a shot and see how it panned out. But later, I also realized that a failure teaches you a lot, and it teaches you so much more than when you do things slowly and think very carefully about the plan, because you're going to be wrong anyways, and so you want to realize that very early on. So I think that for my career, even if the startup fails, that's still going to be, for me personally, a fantastic experience and a fantastic upgrade. I don't really think that there is, on the personal side, a downside in starting a company like this.
What about your own personal credit quality, your own personal finances? You'd be fine going bankrupt and recovering?
Well, I wouldn't go personally bankrupt. Like, the company might have to wind down if we fail and we don't manage to sell and if we don't manage to IPO or any of those things. But yeah, sure, we'll be fine.
You feel it's sufficiently protected?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Giovanni, how has it been raising that seed money? Was it easy? Was it a struggle?
I would say it was kind of relatively straightforward when we had clarity around what we wanted to do. So we started right at the beginning of the pandemic, so definitely it wasn't kind of fun. For us was really about focusing on the execution and say, okay, what do we want to get out of the process? What do we want to get out of the business? Try and identify, do we have kind of a big enough problem to solve, really? So there's lots of noise, obviously, when you try and raise, and that's kind of not easy. Can be intense, can be a bit of a distraction. So we decided to kind of just focus on building, executing, and then focusing on value that we could kind of drive for companies, and then raising from some of the probably best operators on the planet. We managed to accomplish that with just kind of a result of good work and building and executing at pace, I would say.
And you were involved with Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. Can you explain how that helped, and whether there's the equivalent kind of setup in Europe?
I think there is sometimes a bit of a misconception around Y Combinator. So Y Combinator is an amazing ecosystem. It's just a fantastic program, a great experience, but it's not going to kind of make your company, right? So Y Combinator is a great resource that you can tap into as you build the company, as you scale the company. You can get access to resources, people, network, and kind of a lot of support, which is fantastic. But ultimately, you need to stay focused and build. The big risk, obviously, Y Combinator has lots of weight. You're going to get lots of attention, and that can be, again, like a massive distraction, which can not help in focusing and building the company.
What kind of distraction? I
find that quite
surprising.
I say distraction a lot. It's like, I can say, distraction is about VCs that are interested in what you're doing. They want to have conversations. There is partners, people that want to work with you as well, which can be fantastic, but is that what you need at a specific stage of the company? If you are raising capital, fantastic, have the conversation, take the capital that you need, and focus on whatever is next. If you are not looking to raise because you need to focus on building your sales machine, you need to focus on building your product, you need to focus on hiring, you should just be really, really careful.
Giovanni, it sounds to me like maybe there's too much money around, that you sound almost spoiled with attention, and we need to focus on the business. And
yeah, I think there is Matthias in the previous panel just said that there is obviously a lot of money coming in, specifically from the Valley. There's a lot of IPOs that happened recently, so capital is available, and that's obviously really, really good for founders. But ultimately, capital is not just it's kind of a mean to an end, like it's a vehicle. Ultimately, you need to use the capital in a way that makes sense to build the business that obviously is going to be a big success and return the capital to the investors.
Rachel, you founded Beam Analytics in 2009, which was sold to Zendesk in 2015. So you have, you obviously have a tremendous amount of experience here in founding a firm. How would you compare the environment in 2009, around that time, not a very auspicious moment in terms of the financial environment? How would you compare that mood to now when you're running Sweep and growing Sweep?
Yeah, so in 2009, we just didn't know that we were a startup because there were very few, all this tech ecosystem, we just didn't know that we were starting something techy, something with all those codes of the startup and the stocks, and it was really, it was the early days even in France. We've grew up this ecosystem since then, and we already talked about that on this stage today. But yes, it was very different time, very few fundings available. So since then, there is a tremendous progress in terms of seed rounds that have been able to that have really gave the right resources to this ecosystem through time. And now we've built also in France the latest stage, resources for the same ecosystem. So yeah, at the beginning it was in 2009, even to recruit people, even to talk to international customers, it was a little bit complicated. To get attention in the press, it was complicated. But at some point, we were very lucky to have a product that was completely disliked in France. So it was a SaaS. Cloud business intelligence solutions. And
why was it disliked in France?
because all the CTOs we were talking to in the French companies, they were saying something like, "Oh, you're just kidding. No one will put their data in the cloud. Are you mad at it? How do you want to build a business out of it?" And actually, it was super fun because through LinkedIn, I was doing the same sales approach, with US CTOs, same size of companies, same industries, and actually all those guys through LinkedIn were saying, "Okay, I want a demo. I want to follow what you're doing. I want," and it was crazy that from 2009 to 2015, when we've been acquired by Zendesk, actually we were generating more than 80% of our revenues outside of France, mostly in the US. And thank you the cloud, thank you the software as a service, technologies for that kind of story. So it's a complete different environment today. We have all the tools to reach out the planet, and the world is super vast, so that's great. And when you think about all all the Zoom, the conference tools that you can use for to grow your sales. When you think about all those new employer of records platforms that allow you to recruit everywhere in the world without having to create a subsidiary, in the countries you are targeting. That's fantastic, So fundings are here in Europe, attentions from US VCs are here, tech recruitments, tapping into the Silicon Valley engineers today. I have plenty of those guys who want to relocate in Europe. I have a real example of that. So. Yes, we are on good path, all of us in this room.
That's very, very good news. Would you each, if you don't mind, because your firms are a little less well known than some of the unicorns we talked to earlier, can you give us the kind of the 1 minute elevator pitch, if you like, on exactly what the company does and why it's so compelling and why it's going to become a unicorn and take over the world, etc. Starting with Fabric Nano.
Sure. So. Essentially, we are developing new technologies to manufacture chemicals, which are bio-based, as opposed to based on traditional chemistry, which usually goes through either heavy metals or starts from oil. Essentially, if you think about a chemical factory, they buy cheap chemicals, they put it into a vat, they wait, and then they transform it into an expensive chemical. The transformation happens because inside the vat, there is a catalyst, a substance that makes the reaction happen. Essentially, we are developing new ways to make natural catalysts, which are called enzymes. They are the part within the cells that make the reactions happen either within our bodies or even inside the yeast. Those are the chemicals that make the yeast take sugar and make alcohol and wine and beer out of it. We take those molecules, those enzymes, and then we make them better. We make the whole process cheaper, more stable, easier to deploy. And we do that not by engineering the enzyme itself, which is what many, many other companies do, or engineering the microbe. We engineer the space around the enzyme by arranging different enzymes together in different patterns and immobilizing all of them on a nanostructured substrate. And that's how we gather the value. Then we develop these catalysts, and then we sell them to the chemical factories. So then they can make the chemicals.
Thank you. Sweep, carbon footprint.
Yeah, Sweep is an enterprise carbon management software platform to reduce the emissions of companies, through their entire value chain, through their entire business. So, yeah.
And your customers at present, how are these large corporates?
Yeah, we are mostly targeting large corporations because they are the ones who are the most in the need for that. Today, the regulators are knocking at the door. It's a worldwide, a universal problem, and those big guys, those big names, the big emitters, the dirty ones, are the ones who are facing the most constraints from a reputational standpoint as well. So they have no choice than to reduce their emissions. Problem is that today they are mostly doing this manually, and having a climate journey strategy is also having a technology strategy when it comes to climate-related questions. And this is where there is a fantastic market for us that we are tapping on, and we are addressing them in particular because we think that the best strategy is to go top to bottom. They will onboard their whole value chain, where for small companies it's mostly a nice to have, so far they are not really understanding what's happening. The big names, they have no choice to do so. So lots of money here, lots of actions, lots of reductions to target.
And what are some of your most well-known customers?
Sorry?
Who are some of your most well-known customers?
So we have very big emitters. Today it's a competitive advantage for them, so we are not allowed to disclose what we are doing with them. But for example, in the smaller customers that we have picture organic clothing, and they have plenty of manufacturers all over the worldwide, at worldwide scale, and they are connecting all their suppliers to understand their indirect emissions through this BI for carbon platform, so you are connecting the dots with my former company, because data carbon data, it's just a nightmare today. So it's the next big thing for me.
Great. And Humans?
Humans is an HR platform designed to be the fastest way for companies to onboard and manage their staff. The idea is to help manage processes like onboarding, offboarding, compensation management by integrating deeply with the stack the companies already use and love with products like DocuSign, Slack, G Suite to really generate business velocity and automation.
Can't companies already do all of this? I don't see why. So, what's the problem that you're solving?
So there are, I would say, a massive fragmentation now. So what we basically observe is there are lots of players that are basically focusing on the long tail of SMEs, and there is like other players like Workday, SAP, focusing on the needs of very kind of large companies. But what we observe is there is nothing kind of in between, like nothing that can help companies scaling really fast, go from like 100 employees to kind of a few thousand employees without generating data fragmentation. So that's what we're focusing on.
Okay, thank you. What have been the biggest hurdles, would you say, so far? I mean, have there been any, or is the mood around high-tech entrepreneurship and the availability of capital such that it's really become so much easier? Have you had difficulties?
I mean, it's not easy. Obviously, the capital side, as I mentioned, is getting a little bit easier, and that's helpful. But obviously, isn't easy. Like, there's lots of failure that you need to be dealing with, lots of failure that you need to be dealing with on a regular basis, and that's from like, when you have to kind of close a deal. You can see, okay, we closed a deal, but how many we lost along the way? Or when you're trying to close candidates, for example, now is an amazing moment for candidates in the market because lots of companies are hiring. It's extremely competitive, and you really, if you're a small company without an established brand, you really need to kind of explain why you are kind of the right place for them to be, grow, and thrive as well. So definitely probably hiring actually right now is one of the biggest challenge that we are facing.
And you're serving mainly SMEs. Why not really large companies like Sweep?
I would say for us the reason is specifically around velocity and the model of our business as well. So we have a top-down type sales compared to bottom-up. That means that when we bring a company on board, we really need to have the entire organization using our platform. So if we had to target, let's say, I don't know, Coca-Cola, a massive organization, the sales cycle is going to be like very, very long. And as a small company, obviously, we don't have the resources and the infrastructure to be dealing with that type of process. So for us, the way to kind of accelerate, build up the brand, build up the product, build up the right infrastructure to then go up market and eventually enterprise as well.
Both of you, any difficulties, or is it pretty plain sailing? I would venture that things may get harder if the current financial conditions change. I mean, we feel that perhaps there's a kind of a frenzy and an overhyped mood around tech in lots of ways. Do you think it's become too easy? Are you facing any difficulties at all? If not, I think it might be a sell signal in some ways.
There are loads of difficulties all over the place, of course. Even in the fundraising process, I agree with what Giovanni was saying earlier about the fact that right now there is a lot of capital, but it's also true that you, at least when you are fundraising for seed, you can still have very little proof point, and you can just fundraise on the vision and the team and not much else. When you're at Series A, you actually have had at least a couple of years to think, or maybe 1 year to get something done, and then you have to show what is it that you got done, why is it that it was great, and even what are the learnings that you've had along the way. And there's going to be many, many learnings, and chances are that you also have had a moment in a startup where you paused for a second and you thought, okay, we are doomed, we painted ourselves in the corner, how can we ever get out of this? But then you also need to have the resilience and the strength and the creativity of coming up with ways to go around the obstacle that you have immediately in front of you and come up with something else.
Can you give us an example of where you've had to do that?
Yeah, sure. So quite predictably, we are a deep tech company. So at some point, one of the early pieces of the companies that we thought would have been crucial actually didn't work. We realized that the literature was empty and in many specific areas, and we realized that when we looked at those empty areas, there was nothing there. And so we had to change our value proposition. And we realized that there was an amazing way of changing our value proposition that we didn't even knew existed before, and the literature hadn't even seen it. We were the first people to actually see it, and we were the first company to stumble into that and be able to capitalize on it. So yeah, I guess that's how you deal with this kind of difficulties.
Rachel, have you had moments sort of with Beam Analytics or with Sweep where you've had to kind of really hustle or come back from a massive problem? One of my favorite stories about it's a really current a company called GoPuff. It's a US kind of convenience delivery firm that's funded by SoftBank. And the co-founders there actually used fake voices with their customers to try and give the impression that there were lots of them instead of just two. And they also kind of wildly exaggerated the size of their customer base. Again, I wonder if these days it's actually necessary to resort to those kind of tactics because there's such optimism. But perhaps with Beam Analytics, there were some tricky moments or some real hustling going on.
Yeah, as I told you in the introduction, when you're French, you're young, you start with you manage to be sensitive to some low signals. I knew that we were answering our own frustration about cloud business intelligence, so we knew that it would work, that we were really answering a need. And then you are showcasing all this, you are pitching, and people tell you it will never work. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each day you take a slap in your face. That's crazy. So until we discovered that, okay, life is not just about France, neither Europe, and actually we can monetize what we are doing through new technologies, through SaaS, we can actually take over the world thanks to internet, And this is when we completely gave up on the French and European market, and we focused our energy in the US and in Northern Europe, and it worked, So how are you, your capacity, your resilience to enjoy those slaps in your face on a daily basis? You have to. That's life. Another example, when we were it's all about adaptation. But when we've been acquired, at the time we got the term sheet, that day I discovered that I was pregnant. It's your employer moment. You say, how can I tell them that now? I'm the CEO. That's fine. By the way, Zendesk answered something like, Zendesk loves babies, period. Okay, pretty elegant. And even today, at Sweep, we started to focus our energy on helping carbon project owners who were sequestrating or reducing emissions. That was great. We managed we developed that great marketplace technology, fintech-like, applied to for technologies applied to answer these needs. And at the end of the day, companies told us we were already targeting the big names because we wanted to have as soon as possible as much impact from a quantity standpoint. Okay, but those guys told us, you know what, that's great what you are doing, but before helping me to contribute and to offset, how am I dealing with the complexity of my carbon data? I just don't know how to embrace that internally, my direct emissions, my indirect emissions. There is nothing existing on the shelf. What can you do for me? You have a BI background, right? And okay, let's completely adapt and fully address the whole climate journey of those big names. And yeah, the capacity you have to understand that first, to be able to have the right team to switch, what you are already working on, and yes, being able to raise enough money to start things again, and just a recommendation, it's super helpful to have several founders around the table.
Say that again.
Several founders. We are 4 founders, and it's helping so much to get clarity when you are yourself you are doubting yourself. There is always someone around the table of those founders who have the aha moment, or who have who is seeing the positive side of it. So yeah, just be sure to have the right persons in your team and at the founders table.
And very quickly, that's a great story about finding out that you were pregnant. Is it better to be a female founder these days than it was a while ago?
It's better, for sure. For sure. It's because of diversity matters, because VCs need to have that kind of diverse portfolio as well, so that's great. For me, it has always been a fantastic differentiator because I was, evolving in the SaaS industry, B2B industry. Business intelligence is mostly male-dominated industry, and to be honest, in the conference room, I was the only one to be. I was the only female, and that's great because you at least you are attracted. They put some attention on you, at least, by default. So it's kind of differentiators, and chacun ses armes, It's we all have our own weapons, and you absolutely have to surf on it, to use it, and it was mine.
Fantastic. Fabric Nano and Humans, you've chosen to found them in London. You're both Italian, I believe. Can you reflect a little on the environment here versus in the UK? I mean, why not stay? Why not start here?
Honestly, I just happened to be in London at the time, and my co-founder also happened to be in London, so that's where we founded it. But really, the UK, I think, is an amazing place to found a startup. I've heard from people that are not British, by the way, that it might be the best place right now, and that's because of a number of reasons. It is much cheaper than Silicon Valley. It has a lot of R&D tax credit. Like, essentially everything that a startup does, not only deep tech startup, but even essentially, presumably even a SaaS startup, everything that they do can be classified as R&D because they're still trying to find the product. They're still researching what the product looks like, how is it that they serve the customer, and that gets you 30% back of your expenditure in tax claim. Access to talent is fantastic, and the government tries really hard, not only to get out of the way of you as a startup as much as possible, but to actually help you. They organize roundtables to ask founders, hey, how can we get more of you guys? How can we help you guys that are already founders to make the startup ecosystem better? Because they realize the value. So yeah, I think the UK is a fantastic place for that. And I think that Italy, in that sense, has a lot to learn from it. But really what's most lacking, I think, is what used to be most lacking, but given what I've heard from today in the room, maybe that's not the case anymore, is optimism. Because when you're making a startup, you really need to think about, you really need to believe in going after the big thing, going for the lofty dream, and believe that you can make it. Because if you don't believe it, you're never going to get there. If you do believe it, you are somehow going to get there. You will find that you're wrong on 10 different corner store items, and then every time you will pivot, and eventually you will get there. Well,
the 3/4 of startups that fail, no doubt, also believe that they would get there, right?
The 3/4 of startups that also fail?
That don't work out. They also believed
yes.
fervently as well.
Yeah, but I'm also sure that all of them that failed, all of them that didn't believe failed.
Giovanni, what about you? Are you a fan of London?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I mean, I've been there now for over 10 years. I moved to London straight out of uni. I wanted to explore. I wanted to learn. From a cultural perspective, I think it was a beautiful place to be. And the big thing for me was also kind of I perceived that as a big talent magnet. So it was generally great to connect with people that were honestly fantastic. And as just said, the infrastructure is extremely solid. Like, as we build businesses, we have a number of challenges, but having kind of a system that is enabling you to move really fast, let's say super easy to open a bank account or to incorporate or to file accounts, these things are really, you don't want to be dealing with these things as you're building a company, especially in the early days.
Great. We're just about out of time. Could I ask each of you really super quickly to give the audience, which hopefully has got some would-be founders in it, one piece of practical advice, practical recommendation that would be really key, starting with you, Rachel.
Don't fantasize to be an entrepreneur just to be an entrepreneur. You absolutely need to be convinced that you are answering a real need on the market. You absolutely need to talk about that to a maximum of persons. just don't care about having your idea stalled or something like that. It never happened. It's a matter of execution. We all know that. But yes, don't fantasize that. It's answer a need first, really.
Great. Giovanni?
I'd say an insight I've got from Y Combinator, like one of the reason why companies actually fail is not because they don't have enough kind of capital or the market or anything else, but the main reason is because founders just they burn out, they're tired, they don't believe anymore in what they're doing. So you really need to pick a problem as something that you really care about solving, because it's a very long journey, it's a tough journey, so you need to be there for the really long run.
Ferdinando?
Go for the single biggest possible thing you could go for, and for the best thing for the world that you could possibly go for, because that is going to help you so much in getting on board the best investor, the best people, and that ultimately is going to make you so much more likely to succeed if you just settle for middle ground.
Great, thank you. And that concludes our panel. Thank you so much to you three panelists. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and good luck. So Tanzin, it's the first time you stay on the stage in Italy?
That is correct, and I'm getting used to the Italian moderating style.
Yes, so maybe you can make us a gift, your practical advice. I mean, The Economist is the best magazine in the world. It's my weekly reading, and for technology especially. Which is your practical advice to the Italian startuppers? This is out of the scheme, out of the play.
Completely out of the blue. I think that, the old adage that if you don't take any risk, you don't get any reward is unbelievably true. So you have to be willing to take risk. And then I would focus, it's true that I have talked to a lot of founders and young companies and observed a lot of successful trajectories. I think that you have to focus on demand above all, demand and what the market wants, which is why I asked the question about the kind of the social mega trends that the unicorn founders saw. So that would be my advice. Take risk, focus on what the demand is.
Thank you very much. It has been a great honor to have you with us. Thanks a lot.
I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Grazie, Tanzin
take rent-a-cars, but any other things. So the key is personalize every type of use. So not owning, but using content. So it would be possible to understand that. So often in the press we complain about copies shared on Telegram, and also is the problem piracy or newspaper distribution? Well, it's also piracy, also like for music, so we cannot say that piracy is not there, but there are content that needs to be paid. The problem is also how they're offered. So Spotify has been a solution to a problem that looked insurmountable, and it's not piracy, because I'm sure you all bought some piracy CD, counterfeited CDs, not because it cost less, but because it was easy. It was round the corner, and actually as soon as we stopped using CDs, physical piracy disappeared, because we weren't much interested in paying less. Also that too, we all want to save money, sure, but the idea is to have contents in a different way. So problem is that we, press journalists or editors, we haven't yet understood the right format to distribute and receive news in the digital world. So they're preparing the set for Alex Braga, who is going to play with artificial intelligence. How can AI change music? It's going to be a fundamental driver, certainly in terms of listening and consumption, because AI will be ever more present in our playlists and understanding before us what we want to listen to. And it will be able probably to help us or hamper us, we don't know yet, but it will certainly play a role. As to the creative side, that's interesting. Alex test is very interesting. So Alex is playing in real time with artificial intelligence. Thank you. And cheers. So artificial intelligence that remade Frank Sinatra's song that he never sang, but might sound like Frank Sinatra. And when samplers started to work, playing Jimi Hendrix's guitar is not copying, but using that sound as a creative tool. So if the voice of Frank Sinatra enables me to do something I couldn't create earlier, why not? Provided you know it's not the voice of Frank Sinatra, but of Asante. So now with Asante and Alex Braga, we'll start tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp, and then at noon, John Elkann with Elon Musk in Texas, and then the 3 Paralympic athletes who got first, third, first, second, and gold medal, and including Kapi Lane, the 100 million follower guy, and then Giorgio Chiellini, who is not just the captain of the national football team, but who invests in startups and AI. He will discuss about that with presenting. So just a few seconds to present Alex and what he's about to do. So Alex is one of the most innovative personalities and creative personalities across the world, besides nominations and awards, etc. So his job is extremely important for all of us, because it shows us creative opportunities that we didn't have in the past. So the entire history of music is based on technology. When recently we discussed technology and music, we think that music changed due to computers, but it's not so, because any a tool, music is used, is a way of using technology. Also, a flute or the instruments that were used in the Stone Age, or the piano that has been, or the guitar. So these are all technology tools, technological tools. And the relationship with machines that generate music has been always impressive and creative. Think of what John Cage was doing by playing silence. And so it's evident that what Alex does today is to get into a different relationship with machines. But we have done that, and we keep doing that with our cell phone. We talk to it, and the cell phone answers back. And so while thinking that what Alex is going to do is strange or crazy, on the contrary, it's a natural step in music production. I hope you have fun. It's truly a sound adventure you're about to enjoy, and the stage is yours.
Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. 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 Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird fly. Blackbird fly. Into the night, there's a great bright light. The night, there's a great bright light. Into the night. There's a great bright light.
Eccoci Alex. Allora, come si fa in questi casi, un grande applauso per Alex Braga.
Grazie.
So,
Grazie mille.
thanks a lot.
Grazie
That was excellent. Congratulations.
Allora,
Thank you.
Prima che diciamo
So before we say anything else, because I realize that there's a lot to say and not enough time, I wanted to say that it's wonderful to be here. This is my first official concert after over 1 year because of the pandemic, and it's I feel very emotional. My knees are shaking, and it was wonderful because I felt alive again. Thank you all, and thanks Riccardo Luna and the staff of this organization. Thank you for being here, using your time for me. It's a great pleasure instead. The very simple question, and I think that everyone who is playing music or listening to music would be, what's the difference of interacting with artificial intelligence versus other musicians? Well, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror, finding another 100 yourselves, and that will give you back something that you as a human cannot do. Now, Emint that we've developed with Professor Regante and Professor Antonini does exactly this. And it's a one-off musical instrument that is made in Italy that made it possible for us to bring this new philosophy to the whole world. And we even played it at Santa Cecilia. At Santa Cecilia, Chile, we were the first conservatory in the world to create the first artificial music. I was the first master professor of artificial intelligence music, and it's a brand new tool to play new music, which is what I call augmented music. Another very simple question. Music has always been a lonely experience. In this case, how can you relate also to other musicians? So can you do this also with the band, with other people, an orchestra maybe? Now, well, I'm more lonely than usual. I look like a bear, so I play it on my own, but it can be used for wonderful tours, such as I have had with Danilo Herrera and Orestano, an international musician. So we started a duet because instead of decoding the emotions of one person, it will decode the emotions of two. And putting both together, it becomes even more even greater. So it's a frontier where you take elements from the past, the present, and project it into the future. So we've heard the Beatles and others, and there was also my own music, Spleen Machine. That is the future perspective. It consists of understanding where you come from, where you are at that very moment, being mindful of yourself, and having a vision of what the future can hold, can give. According to us, our visual artist and our sound engineer know that this can be the way out of a stalemate that you know well of, such as electronic music, which was simply about pressing the play button on a stage. This is contemporary music, which is extremely human-centered. It is not by chance that little by little I have started using this new trend of digital humanism. Now, Riccardo asked you a question as a provocateur. What do you think about these artificial intelligences that compose like Mozart? I hate them with all myself because there's no need to have that. If there needs to be another Mozart, it won't be a machine. Machines cannot compose because machines don't know what fear and joy are about. They don't know what it is like to suffer. They've never waited for a man or a woman under a window. They've never made love. It will just combine notes. It's the art, the connection to the transcendent dimension that tells you why there's an A after a B and not a C. It's not an algorithm, and no one will be able to replace that with artificial intelligence. Humans are at the center of everything, and they needed to be at the center of the technological revolution. Otherwise, the machines won't go anywhere by themselves. What's the future for Alex Fraga? What are you going to do now that little by little the world of music is going to open up again? Well, I was very lucky when COVID hit our sector, our industry, because thanks to Fabrizio Capobianco and many other entrepreneurs, well, we've done the best thing we could do, that is putting in place Alive, my creature, which together with artificial intelligence is a representation of the future, the phygital music. A scary word, which, however, is the key to understand what's going to happen in the future. We need to live in hybrid scenarios where platforms like Alive will make it possible for us to make augmented digital experiences that you can't do live. It's not going to replace concerts. I am very much nervous when our competitors, and now I feel like a start-upper in saying this, propose a streaming model like TV used to do 30 years ago. You know, I was on TV 30 and 20 years ago, so I remember what live music was then. And now the users, our fans, needed to be immersed into augmented reality and NFT, and that is the very last topic I want to close on. Now, with this little camera here tonight, with Alive, we are attempting the first global experiment, the first experiment worldwide of this kind. Alive is the first platform that, thanks to its new algorithm, will be able to create in real time an NFT from the performance as the musician is playing on stage. So I created an NFT while I was playing, and this NFT is ready to be sold at an auction, or in our case, since we don't want to make money out of this event, we will offer it to Elon Musk tomorrow. Maybe Elon Musk is not interested because he doesn't care about Alex Braga, but if they sell crypto kittens, maybe Alex Braga at the Officina Grande Riparazione might sell as well, might go as well. This is another revolution because musicians were regarded as the pariah of modern art because they had nothing to sell. Thanks to NFT and the work we do with Alive, that is transforming in real time your music into a unique piece of art, that will give a brand new energy to streaming concerts because they will be conducive to creating works of art. And music is art. The musical industry was wrong when it destroyed the poetry in the art of music. And we, thanks to technology, we're taking small steps to bring back all that poetry into our hearts. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being with us.